Chapter 26. Dr. Seward's Diary. 29th October. This is written in the train from Varna to Galatz. Last night we had all assembled a little before the time of sunset. Each of us had done his work as well as he could, so far as thought and endeavor and opportunity go. We are all prepared for the whole of our journey, and for the work for when we get to Galatz. When the usual time came round, Mrs. Harker prepared herself for her hypnotic effort, and after a longer, more serious effort on the part of Van Helsing that had been unusually necessary, she sank into the deep trance. Usually she speaks on a hint, but this time the professor had to ask her questions, and to ask them pretty resolutely. Before we could learn anything, at last, her answer came.
"I can see nothing. We are still. There are no waves lapping, and are only a swirling swirl of water softly running against the hawser. I hear men's voices calling near and far, and the roll and creak of oars in the rowlocks. A gun is fired somewhere. The echo of it seems far away. There is trampling of feet overhead, and ropes and chains being dragged along. What is this? There is a gleam of light. I can feel the air blowing upon me."
Here she stopped. She had risen, as if impulsively, from where she had lain on the sofa, and raised both of her hands, palms upward, as if lifting a weight. Van Helsing and I looked at each other with understanding. Quincy raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at her intently, whilst Harker his hand instinctively closed around to the hilt of his kukri. There was a long pause. We all knew that the time where she could speak was passing, but we felt it was useless to say anything. Suddenly she sat up, and as she opened her eyes, said sweetly,
"Would none of you like a cup of tea? You all must be so tired."
We could only make her happy, and so acquiesced. She bustled off to get tea. When she had gone, Van Helsing said,
You see, my friends, he is close to land. He has left his earth chests, but he has yet to get on shore. In the night he might lie hidden somewhere, but if he be not carried on shore, or if the ship do not touch it, he cannot achieve the land. In such case as he can, if it be in the night, change his form and can jump or fly on shore, as he did in Whitby. But if the day come before he gets on shore, then, unless he be carried, he cannot escape. And if he be carried, then the customs men may discover what the box contain. Thus, in fine, if he escape not on the shore tonight or before dawn, there will be the whole day lost to him. We might then arrive in time, for if he escape not at night, we shall come on him in daylight, box up and at our mercy, for he dare not be his true self awake and visible, lest he be discovered."
There was no more that needed to be said, so we waited in patience until the dawn, which time we might learn more from Mrs. Harker. Early this morning we listened with breathless anxiety for a response in her trance. The hypnotic stage was even longer in coming than before, and when it came, the time remaining until full sunrise was so short, we began to despair. Van Helsing seemed to throw his whole soul into the effort. At last, in obedience to his will, she made a reply.
"All is dark. I hear lapping water level with me, and some creaking as if wood on wood."
She paused, and the red sun shot up. We must wait until tonight. And so it is that we are traveling towards Galatz, in the agony of expectation. We are due to arrive between 2 and 3 in the morning, but already at Bucharest we are 3 hours late, so we cannot pass until well into after sunup. Thus we shall have 2 more hypnotic messages from Mrs. Harker. Either or both may possibly throw more light onto what is happening. Later. Sunset has come and gone. Fortunately, it came at a time when there were no distractions. For had it occurred while we were in the station, we might not have secured the necessary calm and isolation we needed. Mrs. Harker yielded to the hypnotic influence even less readily than this morning. I am in fear that her power of reading the Count's sensations may die away, just when we want it most. It seems to me that her imagination is beginning to good work. While she had been in the trance he-thrall, she had confined herself to the simplest of facts. If this goes on, it may ultimately mislead us. If I thought that the Count's power over her would eventually die away equally with her power of knowledge, it might have been a happy thought, but I'm afraid it may not be so. When she did speak, her words were enigmatical.
Something is going out. I can feel it pass me like a cold wind. I can hear far-off confused sounds, as if men talking in strange tongues, fierce falling water, and the howling of wolves.
She stopped, and a shudder ran through her, increasing in intensity for a few seconds until, at the end, she shook as though in a palsy. She said no more, even in answer to the professor's imperative question. When she woke from the trance, she was cold and exhausted and languid, but her mind was alert. She could not remember anything, but asked what she had said. When she was told, she pondered over it deeply for a long time, and in silence. 30th October, 7 a.m. We are near Galatz now, and I may not have time to write later. Sunrise this morning was anxiously looked upon by all of us. Knowing of the increasing difficulty of procuring the hypnotic trance, Van Helsing began his passing earlier than usual. They produced no effect, however, until the regular time, when she yielded with a still greater difficulty, only a minute before the sun rose. The professor lost no time in his questioning. Her answer came with equal quickness.
All is dark. I hear water swirling by, level with my ears, and the creaking of wood on wood. Cattle low far off. There's another sound. A queer one, like...
She stopped and grew white, and whiter still.
Go on! Speak! I command you! Said Van Helsing in an agonized voice.
At the same time there was despair in his eyes, for the risen sun was reddening even as Mrs. Harker's pale face. She opened her eyes, and we all started as she said, sweetly and seemingly with the most unconcern,
"Oh, Professor, why did you ask me to do what you want, knowing that I can't? I don't remember anything."
Then, seeing the look of amazement on our faces, she said, turning to one to the other with a troubled look,
"What have I said? What have I done? I know nothing, only that I was lying here half asleep and heard you say, 'Go on, speak, I command you.' It seemed funny to hear you order me about so, as if I were a bad child."
"Oh, Mother Mina," he said sadly, "it is proof, if proof be needed, of how I love and honor you. When a word for your good, spoken more earnest than ever, can seem so strange because it is to order her whom I am proud to obey."
The whistles are sounding. We are nearing Galatz. We are on fire with anxiety and eagerness. Mina Harker's journal.
30th October. Mr. Morris took me to the hotel where our rooms had been ordered by telegraph, he being the one who could best be spared, since he does not speak any foreign language. The forces were distributed much as they had been in Varna, except Lord Glodeming went to the Vice-Council, as his rank might serve as an immediate guarantee of some sort of the official, we being in the extreme hurry. Jonathan and the two doctors went to the shopping agent to learn particulars of the arrival of the Tsarina Catherine. Later, Lord Glodeming has returned. The council is away and the vice-council sick, so the routine work has been attended to by a clerk. He was very obliging and offered to do anything in his power.
Jonathan Harker's journal.
30th October. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, and I called on the Meisters, Mackenzie, and Steinkopf, the agents of the London firm of Hapgood. They received a wire from London in answer to Lord Godalming's telegraphed request, asking us to show them any civility in their power. They were more than kind and courteous, and took us at once on board the Tsarina Catherine, which lay at anchor in the river harbor. There we saw the captain, Donaldson by name, who told us of his journey. He said in all of his life he had never had such a favorable run.
"Man," he said, "but it made us afraid. It made us afraid, for we expected that we would have to pay for it with some rare piece of little ill luck. But as to keep us the advantage, It's no canny to run frae London to the Black Sea, where the wind and tell you that though the devil himself be blowing on your sails for any purpose. And at the time, we could see no thing. Gin, we were nigh a ship on port, or a hell long, a folk fell on us, and travelled with us, till after it had lifted and we looked out, the devil thing we could see. We ran by Gibraltar, would have been able to signal, until we came to the Dardanelles, and had to wait until get our permit to pass. We never weren't waiting within hauling aught. At first, I was inclined to slack off on the sails, and beat about until the fog was lifted, but whiles I thought if the Dales would mind to get us into the Black Sea quick, he was like to do it whether we was go to or no. If we had a quick voyage, it would be no to our miscredit with the owners, or no hurt of our traffic, and the old man who served in his erring purpose would be deceitfully grateful for us to be no hindering on him.
This mixture of simplicity and cunning, of superstition and commercial reasoning, aroused Van Helsing, who said,
"Mine's friends, that devil is more clever than he is thought by some, and he know when he meets his match."
The skipper was not displeased by the comment and went on,
"Well, we got past the Barathas. The men began to grumble. Some of them, the Romanis, came up and asked me to heave over a big old box which had been put on board by a queer-looking old man just before we started free London. I'd seen them spread at the fellow, and they put their twined fingers when they saw him, to guard against the evil eye. Ha, man, but the superstition of foreigners is perfectly ridiculous. I've seen them about their business pretty quickly, but just after that fog closed in on us, I felt a wee bit as they didn't ain't nothing, though I wouldn't say what it was again in the big box. Well, on we went, and as the fog didn't let up for 5 days, I just let the winds carry us. For if the Delhi wanted to get somewheres, well, he would fetch it up on a reef, and if he didn't, well, we'd keep a sharp lookout anyway. Sure enough, there was a fairway and deep water all the time, and 2 days ago, when the morning sun came through the fog, we found ourselves in the river opposite of Galatz. The Romanians were wild and wanted me to right or wrong take their box and fling it into the river. I had anger with them and gave them a handshake, and when the last of them rose off of the deck with his head in his hand, I convinced them that the evil eye or no evil eye, the property and trust of my owners is better than a handshake in the river than the river Danube. They had, mind you, taken the box on the deck ready to fling it in, and as it was marked Galatz via Varna, I thought I'd just let it lie until we discharged it in the port and get rid of it altogether. We didn't do much clearing that day, and had to remain in the Naxon at anchor. But in the morning, bright and early, an hour before sunrise, a man came aboard with an order, written to him from England, to receive a box marked for one Count Dracula. Sure enough, the matter was one ready in hand. He had his papers right, and glad I was be able to get rid of the damn thing. Before I was beginning to myself feel uneasy at it. If the Delhi had any luggage aboard this ship, I'm thinking its name would be either that or the same."
"What was the name of the man who took it?" asked Dr. Van Helsing, with restrained eagerness.
"I'll be telling you quick,"
he answered, and stepping down to his cabin, produced a receipt signed Immanuel Heinsheld. Bergen Street 16 was the address. We found that it was all the captain knew, so with thanks we came away. We find Heinsheld at his office, a Hebrew rather than an Aldef theater type, with a nose like a sheep and a fez. His arrangements were pointed with spice. We doing the pronunciation, and with a little bargaining he told us what he knew. This turned out to be simple but important. He had received a letter from a Mr. Deville of London telling him to receive, if possible, before sunrise, so as to avoid the customs, a box which had arrived at Galatz on the Tsarina Catherine. This he would to give to charge of a certain Petrov Skinsky, who dealt with the Slovaks, who had traded down the river to the port. He had been paid for his work by an English banknote, which had been duly cashed for gold at the Danube International Bank.
When Skinsky had come to him, he had taken him to the ship and handed over the box so as to save portionage. That is all he knew. We then sought for Skinsky, but were unable to find him. One of his neighbors, who did not seem to bear him any affection, said that he had gone away 2 days before, no one knows whether. This was corroborated by his landlord, who received a message by key of the house together with the rent due in English money. This must have been at between 10 and 11 o'clock last night. We were at a standstill yet again. Whilst we were talking, one came running and breathlessly gasped out that the body of Skinsky had been found inside the wall of the churchyard of St. Peter, and that the throat had been torn open as if by some wild animal. Those we had been speaking with ran off to see the horror, the woman crying, "This is the work of the Slovak!" We hurried away, lest should have been in some way drawn into the affair, and so detained. As we came home, we arrived at no definitive conclusion. We were all convinced that the box was on its way, by water, somewhere, but where that might be, we would have to discover. With heavy hearts, we came home to the hotel to Mina. When we met together, the first thing was to consult as to taking Mina out again into our confidence. Things were getting desperate, and it's still at least a chance, though a hazardous one. As a preliminary step, I was released from my promise to her. Mina Harker's journal.
30th October, evening. They were so tired and worn out and dispirited that nothing could be done till they had some rest. So I asked them all to lie down for half an hour whilst I entered everything up until that moment. I feel so grateful to the man who invented the traveller's typewriter, and to Mr. Morris for getting this one for me. I should feel quite astray doing the work if I had to write with a pen. It is all done. Poor dear Jonathan, who must have suffered so, who must be suffering now. He lies on the sofa, hardly seeming to breathe, and his whole body appears to in collapse. His brows are knit, his face is drawn up and in pain. My poor fellow, maybe he is thinking, and I can see his face all wrinkled up with the concentration of his thoughts. Oh, if I could only help at all, I shall do what I can. I have asked Dr. Van Helsing, and he has gotten me all the papers that I have not yet seen. Whilst they are resting, I shall go over carefully, and perhaps I may arrive at some conclusion. I shall try to follow the professor's example, and think without prejudice on the facts before me. I do believe that under God's providence, I have made a discovery. I shall get the maps and look over them. I am more than ever sure that I am right. My new conclusion is ready, so I shall get our party together and read it. They can judge it. It will very well to be accurate, and every minute is very precious.
Mina Harker's memorandum, entered into her journal.
Ground of inquiry. Count Dracula's problem is to get back to his own place. A. He must be brought back by someone. This is evident, for had he had the power to move himself as he wished, he could go as if man or wolf or bat or some other way. He evidently fears discovery or interference in the state of helplessness in which he may be, confined as if he is between dawn and sunset in his wooden box. B. How is he taken? Here is a process of exclusions that may help us, by road, by rail, or by water. 1. By road. There are endless difficulties, especially leaving in a city. X. There are people, and people are curious and investigate. A hint, a surmise, a doubt as to what might be in the box would destroy him. Y. There are, or there very well be, customs or artillery officers to pass. Z. His pursuers might follow. This is his highest fear, and in order to prevent him being betrayed, he has repelled, so far as he can, even his victim, me. 2. By rail. There is no one in charge of the box. It would have to take its chance on being delayed, and delay could be fatal, with enemies on the track. True, he may escape by night, but what would he be if left in a strange place with no refuge that he could fly to. This is not what he intends, and he does not mean to risk it. 3. By water. Here is the safest way in one respect, but with the most danger in the other. On water he is powerless except at night. Even then he can only summon fog and storm and snow and his wolves. But were he wrecked, the living water would engulf him, helpless, and he would be lost. He would have the vessel drive onto land, and if it were unfriendly land, where he was not free to move, his position would even be still desperate. We know from the record that he is on the water, so what we have to do is ascertain what water. First thing is to realize exactly what he has done as of yet. We may then get a light on what his later task would be. Firstly, we must differentiate between what he did in London as part of his general plan of action, where he was pressed for moments and had to arrange as best he could. Secondly, we must see, as well as we can surmise it from the facts that we know, what he has done here. As to the first, we evidently intended to arrive at Galatz and sent envoys to Varna to deceive us lest we should ascertain his means of exit from London. His immediate and sole purpose then was to escape. Proof of this is the letter of instructions sent to Emanuel Heidelsheim to clear and take the box before sunrise. There was also instructions to Petrov Skinsky. These are only guesses, but there must be some message or letter, since Skinsky had came to Heidelsheim. That, so far, his plans were successful, we do know. The Tsarina Catherine had made a phenomenally quick journey, so much that the Captain Donaldson suspicious were aroused, but his superstitions united with his canniness played the Count's game for him, and he ran with his favoring wind through the fogs and all until he brought up blindfold to Galatz. That the Count's arrangements were well made had been proved. Heimelsheim cleared the box, took it off, and gave it to Skinsky. Skinsky took it off, and here we lose the trail. We only know that the box is somewhere on the water, moving along. The customs and the artillery, if there is any, have been avoided. Now, we come to what the Count must have done after his arrival. On land, at Galatz. The box was given to Skinsky before sunrise. At sunrise, the Count could appear in his own form. Here, we ask why Skinsky was chosen at all to aid in his work. In my husband's diary, Skinsky was mentioned as dealing with the Slovaks who traded down the river to the port, and the man's remarks that the murder was the work of a Slovak showed the general feeling against his class. The Count wanted isolation. My surmise is this, that in London the Count decided to get back to his castle by water as the most safe and secret way. He was brought up from the castle by Strigani, and probably delivered their cargo to the Slovaks, who took the boxes to Varna, for there they were shipped for London. Thus the Count had knowledge of the persons who could arrange this service. When the box was on land, before sunrise or after sunset, he came out of the box, met Skinsky, and instructed him to do as to arrange the carriage of the box upriver. When this was done, and he knew there was all in train, he blotted out his traces, as he thought, by murdering his agent. I have examined the map and found that the river most suitable for the Slovaks to have ascended is either the Prith or the Serif. I've read that in the typescript. In my trance, I hear cows low and water swirling level with my ears, and the creaking of wood. The Count in his box then was on a river in an open boat, propelled either by oars or poles, by the banks near, and it is working against the stream. It would be no such sound if floating downstream. Of course, it may either be the Serif or the Purif, but we may possibly investigate further. Now of the two, the Purif is the more easily navigated, but the Serif is at Fundu, joined by the Bizritz, which runs round the Borgo Pass. The loop makes it manifestly as close to Dracula's castle as can be gotten by water. Mina Harker's journal continued. When I had done reading, Jonathan took me by the arms and kissed me. The others kept shaking me by the hands, and Dr. Van Helsing said, our dear Madam Mina is once again our teacher. Her eyes have been where we were blinded. Now we are on the track once more, and this time we shall succeed. Our enemy is at the most helpless, and if we come to him by day on the water, our task could be over. He has a start, but he is powerless to hasten, as he may not leave his box lest those who carry him may suspect. For them to suspect would be to prompt them to throw him in the stream where he perish. This he knows and will not. Now, men, to our council of war, for here and now we must plan what each and all shall do. I shall get a steam launch and follow him, said Lord Godalming. And our horse is to follow on the banks, lest by chance he land, said Mr. Morris. Good, said the professor. Both good, but neither must go alone. There must be force to overcome force if needed. The Slovak is strong and rough, and he carries rude arms. All the men smiled, for amongst them they carried a small arsenal. Said Mr. Morris, I brought some Winchesters. They're pretty handy in a crowd, and there may be some wolves. The Count, if you remember, took some other precautions. He may have requisitions on others than that Mrs. Harker could not quite hear or understand. We must be ready at all points. Dr. Seward said, I think I'd better go with Quincy. We have been accustomed to hunting together, and we too, well armed, will be a match for whatever may come along. You must not go alone, Art. It may be necessary to fight the Slovaks, and a chance thrust, for I don't suppose these fellows carry guns, would undo our plans. There must be no chances this time. We shall not rest until the Count's head and body have been separated, and we are sure that he cannot reincarnate. He looked at Jonathan as he spoke, and Jonathan looked at me. I could see that the poor dear was torn in about his mind. Of course he wanted to be with me, but then the boat service would most likely be the one to be destroyed. The vampire. Why did I hesitate to write that word? He was silent for a while, and during the silence Dr. Van Helsing spoke. Friend Jonathan, this to you for twice reasons. First, because you are young and brave and can fight, and all energies may be needed in the last, and again, it is your right to destroy him, that which has wrought such war on you and yours. Be not afraid for Madam Mina, she will be in my care, if I may. I am old. My legs are not so quick to run as once, and I am not used to riding so long or to pursue as need be, or to fight with lethal weapons, but I can be of other service. I can fight in other way, and I can die if need be, as well as the younger men. Now let me say that what I do with Madam Mina is right into the heart of the enemy's country. Whilst the old fox is tied in his box, floating down the running stream whence he cannot escape the land, where he dares not raise the lid of his coffin box, lest his Slovak carrier should in fear leave him to perish, we shall go to track where Jonathan left, to Bistris, over the Borgo, and find our way to the castle of Dracula. Here, Mina's hypnotic power will surely help, and we shall find our way, all dark and unknown otherwise, after the first sunrise, when we are near that fateful place. This must be done, and other places must be sanctified, so that the nest of vipers can be obliterated. Here Jonathan interrupted hotly. Do you mean to say, Professor Van Helsing, that you would bring Mina, in her sad case and tainted as she is, with that devil's illness, right into the jaws of his death trap? Not for the world, not for heaven or hell. He became almost speechless for a minute and went on. Do you know what that place is? Do you have you seen that awful den of hellish infamy? The very moonlight alive with ghastly shapes and every speck of dust that whirls in the wind, a devouring monster in embryo. Have you felt the vampire's lips on your throat? Here he turned to me, and his eyes lit on my forehead. He threw up his eyes with a cry. Oh my God, what do we have to do? Have this terror upon us? And he sank down in the couch in a collapse of misery. The professor's voice, as he spoke in clear, sweet tones, which seemed to vibrate the air, calmed us. Oz, my friend,
It is because I would save Madam Mina from that awful place that I would go. God forbid I should take us into that place. There is work, wild work to be done there, that her eyes may not see. We men here, all save Jonathan, have seen with our own eyes what is to be done before that place is to be purified. Remember that we are in terrible straits. If the Count escape us this time, and he is strong and subtle and cunning, he may choose to sleep him in for a century, and then in that time, our dear one, he took my hand, would come to him to keep him company, and would be as those others that you, Jonathan, saw. You have told us of their gloating lips. You've heard their rabbit laugh as they clutched the moving bag that the Count threw to them. You shudder, and very well be. Forgive me, I make you so much pain, but it is necessary. My friend, is it not a dire need for that which I am given, possibly my life? If it were one who went into that place to stay, it is I who should keep them company.
Do as you will, said Jonathan, with a sob that shook him all over. We are all in God's hands. Later, oh, it did me good to see the way these brave men worked. How can women help loving men when they're so earnest and true and so brave? And too, it made me think of the wonderful power of money. What can it not do when properly applied, and what might it do when basely used? I felt so thankful that Lord Godalming is rich, and that both he and Mr. Morris, who also has plenty of money, are willing to spend it so freely. For if they did not, our little expedition could not have started either so promptly or so well equipped, as it was within another hour. It was not 3 hours since it was arranged what part each of us were to do, and now that Lord Godalming and Jonathan have a lovely steam launch, with steam up ready to start moving at a moment's notice. Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris will have a half a dozen good horses, well appointed. We have all the maps and appliances of various kinds to be held. Professor Van Helsing and I are to leave by the 11:40 train tonight for Verista, where we are to get a carriage to drive by the Borgo Pass. We are bringing a good deal of ready money, as we are to buy a carriage of horses. We shall drive ourselves, for we have no one whom we can trust in this matter. The professor knows something of a great deal many languages, and we shall get on all right. We all have gotten arms, even for me a large-bore revolver. Jonathan would not be happy unless I'm armed like the rest. Alas, I cannot carry one arm as the rest do. The scar on my forehead forbids that. Dear Dr. Van Helsing comforts me by telling me that I am fully armed, as they may be wolves. The weather is getting colder by the hour, and there are snow flurries here and that which come and go by as of warnings. Later, it took all of my courage to say goodbye to my darling. We may never meet again. Courage, Mina. The professor is looking at you keenly. His look is a warning. There must be no tears now, unless it may be that God will let them fall in gladness.
Jonathan Harker's journal. October 30th, night. I am writing this in the light of the furnace door of the steam launch. Lord Godalming is firing up. He is an experienced hand at the work, and has had for years a launch of his own in the Thames and another at Norfolk Boards. Regarding our plans, we've decided that Mina's guess was correct, and if any waterway were chosen for the Count's escape back to his castle, the Seref and then the Brivista at its junction would be the one. We took it that somewhere at the 47th degree, north latitude, would be a place chosen for the crossing the country between the river and the Carpathians. We have no fear in running at good speed in the river at night. There is plenty of water, and the banks are wide enough apart to make steaming, even in the dark, easy enough. Godalming tells me to sleep for a while, as it is enough for the present for one to be on watch. But I cannot sleep. How can I sleep when there's the terrible danger hanging over my darling, and her about to go to that awful place? My only comfort is that we are in the hands of God. For only for that faith it would be easier to die than to live. So be quit of all the trouble. Mr. Morris and Dr. Seward were off on their long ride before we started. there to keep to the right bank, far enough along to get on higher lands where they can see a good stretch of the river and avoid the following of its curves. They have, for the first stages, 2 men to ride and lead their spare horses, 4 in all, as not to excite curiosity. When they dismiss the men, which shall be shortly, they shall themselves look after the horses. It may be necessary for us to join forces. If so, they cannot mount our entire party. One of the saddles has a movable horn and can be easily adapted for Mina if required. It is a wild adventure we are on. Here, as we are rushing through the darkness, with the cold from the river steaming up to rise up and strike us, with all the mysterious voices of the night surrounding us, it all comes home. We seem to be drifting into unknown places and unknown ways, into a whole world of dark and dreadful things. Godalming is shutting the furnace door. 31st October. Still hurrying along, the day has come, and Godalming is sleeping. I am on watch. The morning is bitterly cold. The furnace heat is grateful, for we have heavy fur coats. We have only passed a few open boats, but none of them hold on board any box or package anything like the size of the ones we seek. The men were scared every time we turned our electric lamp on, and they fell to their knees and prayed. 1st November, evening. No news all day. We have found nothing of the kind we seek. We have now passed into the Bristerisa, and if we are wrong in our surmise, our chance is gone. We have overhauled every boat, big and little. Early this morning, one crew took us for a government boat and treated us accordingly. We saw it in a way of smoothing matters, so at Fundu, when the Bristerisa came running to the Seraph, we got a Romanian flag, which we do now fly conspicuously. For which every boat which we were overhauled since had this trick succeeded. We have had every deference shown to us, and not once any objection to which we choose to ask or do. Some of the Slovaks tell us that a big boat passed them, going at more than the usual speed, as had double the crew on board. This was before they came to Fundu. So they did not tell us whether the boat turned to Bristis or continued on the Seraph. At Fundu, we could not hear of any such boat, so it must have passed there in the night. I'm feeling very sleepy. The cold is perhaps beginning to tell upon me, and nature must rest for some time. Godalming insists that he keep the first watch. God bless him for all his goodness to poor Mina and me. 2nd November, morning. It is broad daylight. That good fellow would not wake me. He says it would have been a sin for I slept peacefully and was forgetting my trouble. It seemed brutally selfish to me to have slept so long and let him watch all night, but he was quite right. I am a new man this morning, and as I sit here and watch him sleep, I can do all that is necessary, both as to minding the engine, steering, and keeping watch. I can feel my strength and energy coming back to me. I wonder where Mina is now, and Van Helsing. They should go to the Versetti about noon on Wednesday. It would take them some time to get to the carriage and horses. If they had started and traveled hard, they would be about now at the Borgo Pass. God guide them. I am afraid to think what might happen. If we could only go faster. But we cannot. The engines are throbbing and doing their utmost. I wonder how Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris are getting along. There seem to be endless streams running down the mountains in this river, but as none of them are very large, at present, at all events, are incredible doubtless in winter and when the snow melts. The horsemen may not have met much obstruction. I hope that before we get to Sesba, we may see them, for if by then we have not overtaken the Count, it may be necessary to consult together on what to do next. Dr. Seward's diary. 2nd November. 3 days on the road, no news, and no time to write, if there had been, for every moment is precious. We have only rested a hand needfully for the horses, but we are both bearing it wonderfully. Those adventurous days of ours are turning up useful. We must push on. I shall never feel happy until we get the launch in sight again. 3rd November. We heard at Fundu that the launch had been gone up to Berserista. I wish it wasn't so cold. There are signs of snow coming, and if it falls heavily upon us, it will stop us. In such case, we must get a sled and go on, Russian fashion. 4th November. Today we heard of the launch having been detained by an accident while trying to force a way up the rapids. The Slovak boats get up all right by aid of a rope and steering with knowledge. Some went up only a few hours later. Godalming is an amateur fitter himself, and evidently he is who put the launch in trim again. Finally, they got to the rapids all right, with a local help, and are off on the chase afresh. I fear that the boat is not any better for the accident. The pleasantry tells us that after she got up smoothly in the water again, she kept stopping every now and then, and again, so long as she was in sight. We must push harder than ever. Our help may be wanted soon. Mina Harker's journal.
31st October. Arrive in Varista at noon. The professor tells me that this morning at dawn he could hardly hypnotize me at all, and all I could say was dark and quiet. He is off now buying a carriage and horses. He says that he will later try to buy additional horses so that we may be able to change them on the way. We have something more than 70 miles before us. This country is lovely and interesting. If we were only under different conditions, how delightful it would be to see it all. If Jonathan and I were driving through it alone, what a pleasure it would be to stop and see people and learn of something of their life, and to fill our minds with memories, with all the colors and picturesqueness of the whole wide, beautiful country and the quaint people. But alas. Later, Dr. Van Helsing has returned. He has gotten the carriage and the horses. We are to have some dinner and to start in an hour. The landlady is putting us a huge basket of provisions. It seems enough for a company of soldiers. The professor encourages her and whispers to me that it may be a week before we can get any food again. He's been shopping too, and has sent home such a wonderful lot of fur coats and wraps and all sorts of warm things. There might not be any chance for our being cold. We shall be off soon. I am afraid to think of what may happen to us. We are truly in God's hands. He alone knows what may be, and I pray him, with all the strength of my sad and humble soul, that he will watch over my beloved husband, that whatever happens, Jonathan may know that I loved him and honored him more than I can say, that my latest and truest thought would to be always for him.